There comes a moment in every woman's life when silence speaks louder than words, and walking away becomes the most powerful thing she can do. A wise woman knows her worth. She understands that her peace is priceless, and her presence is a privilege, not something to be begged for, chased after, or undervalued. A wise woman understands that her self-worth is not up for debate. It isn't something she waits for others to validate or define. She knows who she is, what she brings to the table, and what she deserves in every room she walks into, whether in love, friendship, family, or career. This deep sense of worth is not arrogance, it's alignment with her truth. She has spent time with herself. She has walked through fire, healed from wounds, learned from betrayal, and still chose to rise. That journey didn't just build strength, it built identity. And from that identity, she draws a standard, a boundary that says, "You cannot treat me any kind of way and expect me to stay." A wise woman doesn't settle for crumbs because she knows she brings the full feast. She doesn't beg for the bare minimum attention, respect, or kindness. She understands that if she has to chase it, it was never meant for her. And anything she has to fight to prove she deserves was never designed to sustain her soul. She no longer entertains situations that make her question her value. If being with someone makes her doubt herself, shrink her light, or constantly seek approval, she recognizes the damage that does, and she leaves. She knows her worth can't survive in places that require her to betray herself. A woman who knows her worth will not allow her heart to be a battlefield for someone else's indecision. She will not allow confusion to become her normal. She will not keep showing up where she's overlooked, manipulated, or only loved in pieces. She's not desperate, she's discerning. She understands that love should never cost her dignity, that affection without respect is just emotional manipulation dressed in pretty words. And when someone refuses to meet her at the level of respect she walks in with, she doesn't argue, she exits. Her self-worth gives her clarity. It whispers to her in the moments when she feels tempted to compromise, reminding her, "You've been here before and you know how it ends." It shields her from begging, it silences her from over-explaining, and it empowers her to walk away when necessary. Because to a wise woman, self-worth isn't a slogan, it's a standard. It's the voice that says, "I am enough, just as I am. I am not for sale, not for show, and not for suffering. I am not here to be chosen, I am here to choose." A wise woman values her peace more than any temporary connection. She knows that no relationship, no friendship, and no opportunity is worth her mental, emotional, or spiritual well-being. She doesn't chase love that keeps her anxious, nor does she entertain people who bring confusion wherever they go. Peace is her home now, and anything that threatens it is shown the door. She's learned that chaos often wears a charming disguise. It comes wrapped in passion, apologies, or promises to change. But she's no longer blinded by emotional roller coasters. She sees through the highs and lows, the drama that once felt like love, and the arguments that never led to solutions. Now she asks herself, does this give me peace or does it drain me? That question guides everything. Peace to her is not just silence, it's stability. It's knowing where she stands with someone. It's not having to guess if she's enough, if she's wanted, or if the energy will be different tomorrow. Peace is consistency, and she would rather sit alone in stillness than be surrounded by people who keep her spirit in turmoil. She's walked through relationships that felt like war zones where words were weapons and love came with conditions. She's done being the woman who has to carry the emotional weight of two people just to make something work. She now knows that if she has to fight for peace, it was never real peace to begin with. A wise woman stops romanticizing the chaos. She no longer believes that drama means passion or that jealousy means love. She understands that love without peace is just possession wrapped in insecurity. She's no longer impressed by intense arguments followed by apologies. She's impressed by emotional safety and mutual respect. When she senses chaos, She doesn't try to fix it, she steps back. She observes instead of reacts. She watches how people handle their own chaos before inviting them into her calm. Because her peace was earned through growth, healing, prayer, and boundaries, and she guards it like the treasure it is. Even in the face of loneliness, she chooses peace, not because she's numb, but because she knows the cost of chaos. She knows how long it takes to recover from emotional instability, and she refuses to go back to places that left her feeling drained, doubting, and disconnected from herself. To her, peace isn't boring, it's beautiful. It's the freedom to rest, to breathe, and to feel safe in her own presence. It's the foundation for everything she builds: her home, her relationships, her future. And if she has to walk away to protect it, she will, without hesitation. A wise woman no longer falls for well-crafted words that are not backed by consistent behavior. She has learned that talk is cheap and promises are easy to make. Anyone can say the right thing in the moment, especially when they sense they're losing her. But what separates truth from illusion is action, and that's where she places her focus now. She pays close attention to patterns. If someone says they care but constantly make choices that hurt her, she no longer gives them the benefit of the doubt. Words may lie, but patterns don't. She's watched people say, "I'll change," only to repeat the same cycles. Now, she waits to see it, not just hear it. When someone shows her who they are not once, but repeatedly, she believes them. She doesn't try to rewrite their character with her hope. She doesn't explain away bad behavior with potential. A wise woman knows that love isn't proven in speeches, it's proven in consistency, effort, and respect. She's done being the woman who waits for promises to materialize. She's done clinging to maybes, some days, or almost. Her heart is no longer swayed by someone's ability to apologize, especially when the same apologies keep returning like clockwork. If there's no change, there's no growth, and she refuses to remain stuck. A wise woman watches what people do when they think she's not paying attention. She notices who shows up only when it's convenient, who disappears when things get hard, and who only values her when they feel her slipping away. She's not interested in performative affection, she wants real, grounded connection. She also holds herself accountable. She listens to her own words and makes sure her actions align. Because wisdom isn't just recognizing it in others, it's practicing it within. She knows that integrity means doing what you say, especially when it's difficult. And that same standard she holds others to, she holds herself to as well. She no longer gives chances based on potential. Potential may be inspiring, but it's not reality. She builds her life around what is, not what might be. And if someone's actions don't align with the love, respect, or honesty they claim to have for her, she quietly distances herself. No warnings, no explanations. For a wise woman, actions speak volumes. She doesn't need to be convinced, she needs to be shown. Because anyone can say they love you, but the ones who truly do, they don't just say it, they live it. And she's watching not to judge, but to protect her peace, her heart, and her future. A wise woman knows that letting go doesn't mean she's weak. It means she's strong enough to stop holding on to what no longer serves her. It takes courage to walk away from something that once meant everything. But she understands that not everything that feels familiar is meant to stay. Sometimes strength looks like releasing what's breaking her, even if it once made her feel alive. Letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing herself. It's recognizing when she's been pouring into something that keeps returning empty. It's understanding that peace is better than pretending. She no longer sacrifices her sanity to maintain the illusion of connection. If she's the only one holding it together, she knows that it's already falling apart. She's learned that staying too long in the wrong place can cost more than leaving ever will. It can drain her confidence, cloud her judgment, and cause her to forget who she is. That's why she no longer clings out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of letting go. She embraces the unknown, because anything is better than losing herself. A wise woman has felt the ache of release, She knows the sting of saying goodbye to someone she once prayed for, but she also knows the power of choosing freedom over attachment. She's not heartless, she's healed. And healing taught her that loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them. Letting go also means letting go of the illusion of potential, the illusion that if she just tries harder, things will change. She releases the version of them she created in her mind and accepts the reality of who they are. And in that clarity, she finds the strength to walk away without bitterness, just truth. She no longer confuses loyalty with self-sacrifice. She understands that real loyalty should never require her to abandon herself. She's done breaking her own heart just to keep someone else's image intact. If loyalty costs her peace, it's too expensive, and she no longer pays in pieces of herself. She doesn't wait for closure anymore. She doesn't chase explanations. Sometimes, the only closure she needs is knowing that she showed up with love, gave it her all, and chose to walk away with dignity when it became clear she was no longer respected. Her strength is quiet, but it is undeniable. A wise woman lets go with grace, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. She doesn't hate, she doesn't seek revenge, she simply removes herself. Because she knows her worth, honors her peace, and trusts that what's meant for her will never require her to lose herself trying to keep it. A wise woman understands that her emotions are valid, but they are not always the best guide when making life-altering decisions. She has learned sometimes the hard way that feelings can be powerful, but they can also be misleading. That's why she leans on discernment, the ability to see things clearly, even when her heart is clouded with hope, fear, or desire. She doesn't make decisions based solely on how much she loves someone. She's loved people who were not good for her. She stayed in situations because of how they made her feel, even when her spirit was restless. But through those experiences, she discovered that love without wisdom can become a trap, one that keeps her stuck in cycles she was meant to break. Discernment allows her to separate what feels good from what is good. It gives her the power to pause, to reflect, and to see the whole picture, not just the parts she wants to believe. While her heart may cry out for comfort or connection, her discernment reminds her to ask, is this aligned with who I am? Does this add peace to my life or pull me away from it? She no longer gets swept away by charm, chemistry, or connection alone. Those things matter, but they're not enough. Now, she looks deeper. She watches for character, consistency, and compatibility. She asks herself whether this person can walk with her in truth, not just passion. Because emotion can spark a flame, but discernment decides if it's worth building a fire around. A wise woman doesn't rush anymore. She's learned that haste leads to heartache. She takes her time, listens with her spirit, and pays attention to the red flags she once ignored. Her emotions might beg her to stay, to fix, to believe, but her discernment whispers, look again, look deeper, and this time she listens. She trusts her inner knowing, even when it doesn't make sense to others. Discernment isn't always loud, sometimes it's a quiet discomfort, a persistent unease, or a gut feeling she can't shake. She no longer silences that voice. It's not paranoia, it's protection. It's the wisdom that comes from growth, and she honors it fully. Emotions can fluctuate, they rise and fall with time, circumstances, and memory. But discernment stays rooted. That's why she uses it as her compass. When her heart is tempted to settle, to overlook, or to justify, discernment anchors her back to truth. It reminds her not to abandon her standards for temporary emotional satisfaction. She still feels deeply, she's not numb. But now, she balances that depth with direction. She lets her heart love, but her mind lead. And in doing so, she saves herself from unnecessary pain, unnecessary attachments, and unnecessary delays in becoming all that she's meant to be. A wise woman knows that healing is more important than holding on to something that's hurting her. She understands that clinging to what once felt good can become the very thing that blocks her growth. She's no longer afraid of letting go if it means choosing herself. Her focus has shifted from preserving the past to protecting her peace. She's held on before to relationships that were fading, to promises that were empty, and to people who weren't willing to meet her halfway. She stayed when it cost her joy, when it dimmed her light, when it slowly unraveled her from the inside out. And through all that, she learned something powerful. Holding on doesn't always mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're afraid. Healing is no longer optional for her. It's essential. She doesn't run from her wounds. She doesn't cover them with distractions or bury them under busyness. She faces them. She sits with her pain, not because she enjoys suffering, but because she knows real freedom is found on the other side of truth. And truth only comes when you're willing to feel what you'd rather avoid. She chooses to do the hard work, the inner work, the kind of work that doesn't show on the outside right away, the kind that requires late-night reflections, honest journaling, setting uncomfortable boundaries, and walking away even when her heart still lingers. That's what healing demands: commitment to herself above all. A wise woman no longer romanticizes what once broke her. She stops rewriting the story to justify the pain. She stops excusing behavior just because she shared history. She no longer views letting go as failure, she sees it as freedom. Healing allows her to see things clearly, without the haze of emotion or attachment blurring the truth. She gives herself permission to grieve what could have been, but she doesn't get stuck there. She knows that moving on doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means the love is no longer aligned with her becoming, and she refuses to hold on to anything that keeps her emotionally stagnant. Healing has taught her that some chapters must end for the real story to begin. She stopped begging for closure from people who couldn't offer clarity even when they were in her life. She creates her own closure now with truth, with reflection, with self-forgiveness. That's how she moves forward, not in bitterness, but in balance. She doesn't chase healing through someone else anymore. She doesn't believe another person will come along and make her forget the pain. Healing is her responsibility, her journey, her sacred process. And she honors that process, even on the days it feels slow, even when the past tries to whisper its way back in. For her, healing isn't a moment, it's a lifestyle. It's in the way she speaks to herself. It's in the boundaries she sets. It's in the silence she protects and the love she now gives herself first. She no longer holds on for the sake of not being alone. She lets go for the sake of finally being whole. A wise woman understands that choosing clarity in her life doesn't mean she's being cold. It means she's finally being clear. She no longer sugarcoats her boundaries, waters down her truth, or over-explains her decisions to make others comfortable. Her clarity may be misunderstood as distance or detachment, but in reality, it's her deepest form of self-respect. She spent years being misunderstood, labeled as too emotional when she cared, and too heartless when she stopped. But now she realizes it's not about how others see her. It's about how she sees herself. And if her peace comes at the cost of someone else's comfort, so be it. She no longer dims her truth to stay likable. Her clarity doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from experience, from giving too many chances, from staying too long, from explaining herself to people who only heard what they wanted. She's done living in confusion. Now, she speaks with purpose, moves with intention, and sets boundaries that reflect her healing. She knows the difference between emotional shutdown and emotional maturity. She's not shutting down, she's showing up with precision. She's not building walls, she's building standards. And while some may call it cold, she calls it wisdom. Because she's not operating from pain anymore, she's operating from power. Clarity means she no longer entertains mixed signals. She doesn't decode half-truths or cling to words without action. If someone's energy feels inconsistent, she doesn't beg for reassurance, she steps back and observes. Confusion is no longer romantic. In her world, communication is clear or it's non-existent. She no longer engages in one-sided conversations. She doesn't chase closure, force connection, or fight for a spot in someone's life. Her clarity protects her from falling into emotional traps. If someone can't meet her with honesty and presence, she knows it's better to walk away than to wait in uncertainty. This clarity also reflects in how she speaks. She says what she means, and she means what she says. No games, no guilt-tripping, no manipulation, just truth spoken with calmness and conviction. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Her clarity speaks louder than any argument ever could. She's not afraid to say no anymore. She doesn't feel guilty for outgrowing people, situations, or even versions of herself. She's not trying to be cold, she's trying to be clear about what she will and won't allow in her life. And the moment something feels misaligned, she no longer hesitates to adjust her path. In a world that often mistakes silence for indifference, she stands firm in her clarity. She knows her value, she knows her limits, and she's no longer afraid to be misunderstood. Because at the end of the day, clarity doesn't need to be explained, it just needs to be lived. A wise woman understands that growth often demands separation, not just from people, but from versions of herself that no longer align with who she's becoming. She knows that evolution requires space. Space to reflect, space to breathe, and space to rebuild. She's no longer afraid to distance herself from what feels familiar if it no longer feeds her spirit. Growth has taught her that not everyone can come with her. Some people only fit the version of her that tolerated more, spoke less, and settled often. Now that she's speaking up, leveling up, and setting higher standards, she's naturally outgrown certain relationships, and instead of resisting that shift, she respects it. Separation isn't always about anger or conflict. Sometimes it's about clarity. It's about realizing that in order to become who she's meant to be, she has to leave behind what no longer mirrors her growth. She doesn't separate with hate in her heart, she separates with grace, knowing that distance can be an act of self-love. She no longer fears being alone. Solitude has become sacred to her. It's in the silence that she hears her intuition the loudest. It's in the stillness that she finds the courage to evolve. While others may view her isolation as loneliness, she sees it as preparation for the woman she's building from the inside out. Growth doesn't always look like progress to the outside world. Sometimes it looks like disappearing for a while, like turning inward, like saying no more often, like choosing peace over participation. A wise woman honors that phase, she doesn't rush it, and she doesn't apologize for it. She knows that becoming her best self takes time and distance. In her process of growth, she's learned that not everyone is ready to meet her where she's headed, and that's okay. She no longer forces connections or chases after people who don't recognize her worth. She trusts that those meant for her journey will align with her energy, not resist her evolution. Every time she's chosen separation for the sake of her soul, she's come back stronger, more grounded, more clear, more herself. Growth isn't always loud or celebrated. Sometimes it's quiet, sacred, and deeply personal. And the woman she's becoming knows that separation isn't the end. It's often the beginning of everything she truly deserves.